while you're blowing smoke at me. That's all right. That's all right. By the way, I get a lot of people saying to me, I don't like you. So you can understand that, right? So I tell them, you don't have to grin quite that. I tell them, look, my dogs like me. My wife likes me roughly 3/5 of the time. Maybe that's an exaggeration. My kid likes me. What do I care? And if it bothers you that you don't like me, you can get online with all the other people. It's about a mile long. But just for you today, I'll jump you to the front, take you outside, kick your ass. Can I do it, do you think? Yeah, I can do it. I bench press 500 pounds. Get my hands on you, you're cooked. Okay? Besides, you're not going to hit an old guy. You're a cowboy. I'm going to hit you with a brick, and you're going to stand there saying, I'm not going to hit an old guy. So, what was the...
the next step in IACUC.
Oh, the next, thank you. The next step in IACUC. We actually tried this. I think, who judges whether something should be funded now?
The funding agency.
Funding agency, right? And who do they get as panels?
Other scientists.
Right, in the same field, sharing the same paradigm. Do you know how difficult that makes revolutionary science? A great example of that is the ulcer issue. Remember the story of stress causes ulcers?
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, this Australian guy, conjectured on the basis of good evidence that it was Helicobacter pylori. And it took him 18 years to get enough of a hearing. Now it's common knowledge that it's Helicobacter pylori. I don't think that peers, in the full sense, who do the same thing you do, are the right people to judge, because they have a vested interest in the survival of the paradigm. So who should judge? Grand juries, regular people whose money is being spent. Don't forget, science is done with public money. Why shouldn't the public have a voice in what's done? Do you have objections to that, ma'am? No, you don't. Because your generation is a little more open. I don't understand why, but I teach science and ethics, and it started about 15 years ago. Before that, everybody was rednecks, you know, in the worst sense. Now, you don't believe me.
Well, I think it's an interesting observation.
But in that paradigm, doesn't the you're assuming that the public wants to spend the money on research?
Well, there's that. If the public didn't want to, it could stop like that.
Yeah.
I mean, look. I mean, you guys know this as much as I do. Breast cancer is a far bigger problem than AIDS, right? By many, many orders of magnitude. Where does more money get spent? AIDS. Why? Because Elizabeth Taylor does a quilt or something, you know? Regular people could push that too. I mean, if I were a woman, I'd be out there saying, this is an area for triage, where the greatest need should be the greatest expenditure. You know what I mean? Why does one person have an undue influence? I think ordinary people are, I don't know what the right word is for this. They're more educable than, quote, experts allow. You know? When I was frustrated with trying to get a law controlling pain. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who quit school in the 8th grade. And he said, you know, I grew up with cows. If the animals are in pain, they're not normal. And if they're not normal, how can they be any good in research? I was actually moved by that, because that was something I couldn't get deans of medical school to accept. Of course, I've since realized that deans of medical school are not necessarily paradigmatically intelligent people. They're ass-kissers and politicians. And if any of you are deans of a medical school, I'll see you outside. Okay, ma'am?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just got one question more on an opinion from your stance, but
Yeah.
one of the things that's come about, and certainly met the media in the last few years, is this idea that whether we talk about animal welfare groups, animal rights groups, have a higher level of trust in the public eye than those people involved in the production of those animals.
Right.
How do you perceive, or how does that ability to change that trust back to, whether we talk about the science community, the production community, versus those that really aren't involved in it at all?
That's a great question. You got to ask yourself, it really is a great question. You got to ask yourself why that came to be, right?
Mhm.
I'm sure you have some hypotheses.
A few.
Hmm?
A few.
Yeah. Well, track them, and track them relentlessly. I mean, look at some of the ads that are put out there. They're an insult to people's intelligence, you know? The activists are seen, let me stress, seen, to be economically disinterested and therefore honest, which is false because they're ignorant. You see? So I think the way you do it is just, you remember the ad I just discussed a few minutes ago? Look, we used to do it this way, we don't do it anymore. I think that would be a wonderful leap forward for the credibility of the ag community. You know? Or to put it in 2 words, quit lying.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because just yesterday I was using a couple of YouTube videos in swine production class, and one of the videos was they were both logged out or both loaded to YouTube at the same time. There was one very good 3-minute clip about today's production system.
Right.
Title fit what you would search for, had 1,500 views in the last month. That same clip from an animal activist community with a couple different words in the title, it's got 150,000 views. And so we're almost in a public stance of the average person isn't really concerned about what we're doing right, it's what we're doing wrong. And,
Right.
and want to look at that. How?
That's absolutely right. Let me give you an example from veterinary medicine. Veterinarians want to present themselves, and I can prove that to you till the cows come home. They want to present themselves as, quote, the experts on animal welfare. There is nobody at the American Veterinary Medical Association headquarters who even understands the concept of animal welfare. You know how I know that? Because they're constantly saying animal welfare is simply a matter of sound science. Okay, is it? You're a smart kid, you really are. No. Or you've been well educated. You understand that animal welfare is the application of science to ethical questions. These dumb bastards are out there claiming that there's no ethics has to do with anything. You see what I mean? That loses credibility, you know? This is just a matter of sound science. How in the hell can it be a matter of sound science when what you consider good welfare versus bad welfare is a matter of ethics? Right? So if you had a few spokespeople who spoke intelligently, I don't know you just from what you said here, but I would trust you to give a better, cleaner, more credible message than I would trust an awful lot of very senior people. You hear what I'm saying?
Thank you.
Am I wrong?
Good question.
I know this is a modesty statement, but do you understand my point?
Yep.
It's really true. I mean, how in the hell can you say animal welfare? Any welfare is an ethical issue, right? Human welfare, animal welfare. I mean, put it another way. I give you $1 billion. Could you build a welfare meter?
I'd sure try.
I'm sure you would, but you'd know you couldn't succeed, right? Because it's not like body temperature. It's not like percent of body fat. It's a value judgment. So it's a value judgment. Does that somehow make it dirty or obscene? You know, it makes it non-science. Well, it isn't science. There is a field called ethics that is at least as rational as science. It's more dialectical, it's more give and take, you know what I mean? It's more evolving sort of thing. But don't lie and say it's science, because then a guy like me comes along and hoists you by your own petard, whatever a petard is. I have an intimation of what it is, and I like it, you know?
I think it's part of a boat, actually.
Part of a what?
I think it's part of a boat.
A boat?
You know, that you put the sail on.
Okay, I'll
I
buy
think
that.
it gives you the same picture.
Okay.
Just different reference of what's being attached.
No, I'm asking you as a vet, am I wrong?
What's that? Well, having been up in the AVMA, I agree with you. I think part of it, though, also is the fact that at least from their standpoint, the science is it's a defensive position.
Sure.
It really is. It's a defensive position, and it's something that I can defend because it's actually there. Like you said, there is no welfare meter.
I know, but you know, Doc, most of the interesting issues are not scientific issues. You know?
Well, and I have a follow-up question for you on that.
Yeah.
And it's you talk about ethics, and you had shared with me this morning a little bit, and I want to get back to your logic. And if you could expand what we talked about was a veterinarian in Western Canada working at a halal slaughterhouse.
Right.
Okay, and what was happening, if I get this right, the animals were being stunned before they were being slaughtered.
Correct.
And according to halal,
Shouldn't be.
shouldn't be. So the dilemma is, should he report it? And so I was just kind of curious, what was your logic as you went through it to give your opinion? And your column appears in the Canadian Journal of Veterinary Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's where it came from.
Well, I wish I remembered that particular. I've written 20 years. What's 20 times 12?
240.
I've written 240 columns, so I don't remember the details of every one. But I would reconstruct the logic as follows. What's this guy's job? This was an American or Canadian veterinarian who worked in the slaughterhouse. His job was food safety. You know, he had a microbiological background. He was to assure that the procedures were such that they could be counted on to be state-of-the-art safety measures. He's not there as a religious inspector, you know? And if his own personal ethic says to him, animals should be stunned before. And by the way, that's my personal ethic. Even though I come from a Jewish background, I loathe kosher slaughter. I absolutely despise it. It made sense in 2000 BC when the alternative was to bludgeon 2,000-pound ox, you know, with the Flintstone thing. But it doesn't make any sense now. We can do it better. And even if all that stuff, that religious stuff, is true, I figure God would be on my side. If God is genuinely omniscient and intelligent, he would say, thank you for making it more humane, which is what I was trying to do in the first place. You know what I mean? So I would muster all that and say, it's not this guy's job to enforce religious law. It's to enforce food safety. Okay?
It is. I was just fascinated by that discussion in your column. And I'll put a plug in for Bernie. If you really want to read some interesting questions and the response, and these are all basically ethics questions within specifically veterinary medicine. Canadian Journal of Veterinary Medicine carries his monthly column.
Mm-hmm. And actually, the guy who's most responsible is the guy who comes up with the questions for 20 years, Tim Blackwell. There are some fascinating questions from every area of vet med. It's slightly skewed towards food animal, because that's what he is, which is actually more interesting. I mean, how many times can you raise the question of, you know, euthanasia of a healthy pet, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So that would be my answer on that case. And another way to put it, what I'm saying is, ethics is not for the faint-hearted. if you actually say what you, and I don't care whether you're coming from a conservative or liberal, the first thing that happens when you deviate from the party line is you gain massive disapproval from your peer group. You know? I'm a philosophy professor. I'm supposed to be opposed to the death penalty. Why should I be opposed to the death penalty when there are people who commit acts that I believe remove them from the rational purview of humanity? We had a guy who repeatedly raped a 5-year-old girl and then threw her in a chemical toilet to die in the middle of winter. As far as I'm concerned, we don't need that guy. And we don't need to spend $20 million on his rehabilitation or any of that stuff. And I know you guys agree with me because we're in redneck country. And it's not an insult. I'll show you my own books. I am a redneck, and I am more of a redneck than you are.
Is that the title of your book?
No, but it's funny.
Good idea.
I have an autobiography that came out last year, which you really want to read because it's funnier than hell, as you can imagine. But it's called Putting the Horse Before Descartes.
Descartes, yeah.
It's really very funny. People love the title because Descartes said that animals have no minds and no feelings, and that's why I call it Putting the Horse Before Descartes. And